Hey everyone and welcome back to Medinkstudio. Today we are going to discuss about anterior cranial fossa. As we know that the interior of the skull is divided into three main fossas, that is the anterior, middle and the posterior cranial fossa. As you can see in this figure, this green highlighted portion is the anterior cranial fossa. Then here is the middle cranial fossa, and at the posterior aspect there is a posterior cranial fossa. So today in this video we are going to talk about the anterior cranial fossa. So anterior cranial fossa, the main contents of the anterior cranial fossa are the frontal lobe, like the anterior part of the frontal lobe, and also consist of the olfactory pathways. Now let's discuss about so we discussed about the contents. Now let's see the superior view. Like in this diagram over here, you can see a clear superior view of the anterior cranial fossa, and the floor of this anterior cranial fossa is made up of this frontal bone. It's located anteriorly and laterally, and in the midline here is this ethmoid bone, and posteriorly there is the sphenoid bone, specifically this body and these lesser rings. So we discussed about this, you can say that which bones are included on the anterior cranial fossa. So a frontal bone located anteriorly and laterally, and in the midline there is the ethmoid bone, and posteriorly there is the sphenoid bone, specifically the body and the lesser ring. Now let's take a look at the key features of the anterior cranial fossa. So over here in the anterior aspect you can see a frontal crest over here. This is a frontal crest. In this diagram it's not so okay. So here you can see the frontal crest, and this frontal crest is the attachment point for the falx cerebri, and falx cerebri is basically a sheath of dura mater that separates the cerebral hemispheres. And posterior to the posterior to this frontal crest there is a small foramen over here. You cannot see it here clearly, but in between these ethmoid and the frontal crest there is a small foramen. That foramen is known as the foramen cecum, and foramen cecum is rarely open in the adults, but if open then it transmits the emissary venous connections into the nasal cavity. Now posterior to this foramen cecum there is this crista galli of the ethmoid bone, and on the this is also an attachment point for the falx cerebri, and on either side of this crista galli is this cribriform plate of the ethmoid bone, and this cribriform plate is like this, and it consists of numerous holes which transmit the olfactory nerves into the olfactory pulp. Now on this in this frontal bone, if you see on the lateral aspect here, there are some orbital part of the frontal bone. These form the largest part of the anterior cranial fossa and form the roof of the orbits. Now coming more posteriorly, after we discuss about the frontal bone and the ethmoid bone, posteriorly there is this sphenoid bone. Sphenoid bone consists of the body in the middle and the lesser wings on the lateral side. Now this lesser wings curve medially and form these anterior clinoid processes. This is for left anterior clinoid, and this is the right anterior clinoid process. And this anterior clinoid process is basically attachment site for the tentorium cerebelli, which is another sheet of the dura mater that separates the posterior aspect of the cerebrum from the cerebellum. So this is attachment point. Now anterior to this anterior clinoid process over here, I'm using another color here, like anterior to this anterior clinoid process is a small canal, is known as the optic canal, and this optic canal basically transmits the ophthalmic artery and the optic nerve. So these are the contents of the optic canal. Now in between these, and there is a small groove here. You can see, okay, this is the optic canal over here. This is not the optic canal, this is the optic canal. Now in between these optic canal there's a groove which is known as the chiasmatic groove or the chiasmatic sulcus. Yes, chiasmatic sulcus it's known. Now this chiasmatic sulcus is basically a boundary that limits the anterior cranial fossa, or you can say it can it can separate the anterior from the middle cranial fossa, and this is the point where the chiasmatic that chiasma forms.